Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners, viewers at home, going in alphabetical order, starting with Miss Jana S. Brown, who sometimes cosplays as Jenna Ray.
Hi guys, I'm Janet S. Brown. I write under the pen name Jenna Ray, and that's where all the science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy with, we'll call it romantic overtones. Now, it's lots of action and adventure and all fun things. And there might be a little romance sprinkled in there. I am the chief shenanigator around the podcast, so you see me hang out here pretty much all the time.
And clock watcher, so we don't go for 3-hour episodes.
That's true. That's my other job is on time on target.
And because of that, I actually have started getting words after the podcast now that we're not sitting around here for 4 hours on a podcast.
What? See?
All right.
See, are happy, I'm sure. All right, next we have Miss Melissa McShane, the war mistress herself of War Hamster and War Master fame, since both are real now.
That's right. There is War Hamster in our, definition. Hi, I'm Melissa McShane. I am the author of many different fantasy novels of many different fantasy subgenres, including the lit RPG series War Master, and it is full of magical creatures. So I am happy to be here.
Oh, freaking standing in last, but certainly not least, we have the one, the only Miss Terry K. Job, the many voices thereof.
I have returned. Terry K. Job, audiobook narrator, and I think I can now say established short story author. I think I have graduated to that point. Here to make funny faces and make funny voices and talk about magical creatures.
I think you're an author regardless of the format you write it in, so I don't even think you need to specify short story, just author.
Yay, approval.
Just go for that. All righty. So before we get started, we do have the religion question. But given that today's topic is misunderstood fantasy races and creatures, we're going to tweak the question accordingly. So as you know, dear listener, dear viewer at home, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. So coffee or tea, and how do you take it? But also, what are you going to drink it with? An elf, a dwarf, I don't know, a midget, a little cat behind Jana for whatever reason she has there. I don't know why it's misunderstood, but it's there.
Because it's cute. Actually, I can't find which way to lean. So for those who are at home, it's cute, it's green, it has bubbles.
You can see its little teeth.
I know. It's
all right,
little
Jana.
teeth.
So what are you drinking, and who are you drinking it with?
I am drinking Diet Dr. Pepper as always. They have brought back the Diet Dr. Pepper coconut, which makes me ever so happy. The guy that stocks things says it's probably only here for the spring, summer, and early fall months again. So enjoy it while it's here, and then spend your winter wishing that you still had it. So I'll just know, I've got to stock up. We're very good with the whole food storage thing, so we're just going to have to clear out a corner, and that whole corner is going to be Diet Dr. Pepper to get us through the winter months. But that's what I'm drinking. What am I drinking it with?
Or who?
Some kind of or who? I would be into the giant cat monster of some sort. I like cats. I think they were fun, and it would be warm and cozy and all those kinds of neat things, and it would be fun. And it would get some giant pitcher full of, you want to say a pitcher full of cream, but that's actually not good for cats. But if it's a giant monster cat, then I'm going to let it drink anything that it wants.
Okay. What about you, Melissa?
Well, I am, as always, drinking Coca-Cola. Here in India, they make it with sugar, and it is really good. As to who I'm drinking it with, well, my new series has a wonderful griffin who loves cappuccino. So she and I would sit down together, and she has a bowl, of course, and she's very good at drinking it without spilling it, even though she has no lips. So she would enjoy that, and we would have a great conversation.
Okay. And all right. What about you, Terry?
Ooh, I'm also going to break the rules. I'm going to have hot chocolate with just a little bit of coffee creamer in there to make it extra smooth. And I'm actually going to be drinking it with a race I made up. They're
Okay.
called the Volventus. They are a race of foxes who can talk, have their own religion and spiritual beliefs, and have a very interesting sense of humor.
So I'm going to approach this backwards. I'm going to say the things or beings I would want to drink with, and then pick the beverage I think they would want to drink so I can drink it with them. So first, obviously, elves suck and dwarfs are awesome. So with dwarfs, it's got to be ale, obviously, because dwarfs and ale, it just kind of goes hand in hand. And also orcs, because I also think they're misunderstood. And I think orcs are going to go for something harder, so maybe like a whiskey, a bourbon, something. And then I just won't get into a drinking competition with either one of them because I'm going to lose in both cases. I imagine drinking with like an orc or a dwarf would be like trying to keep up with a short Irishman on St. Patty's Day. I'm just not going to win.
You got to get that good burn in your throat.
All right. So before we get started, I do not want to get lost in the sauce and forget the commercial. So we're going to air the commercial now, and we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the woman early today, and then we don't have to stop our shenanigans later.
Beginner witch Chloe has a problem. There's a frog in her tub who says he used to be a man. Worse, his memory is slipping away from him. Magic doesn't work, so there's only one way she can think of to turn him back. But can she bring herself to do it? And that's only the beginning of her challenges. In these 14 short fairy tale retellings, including Little Red Riding Hood, The Frog Prince, and The Princess and the Pea, follow the adventures of Chloe and her family as they fall into one fairy tale after another. Warts and All is written by Melissa McShane. This expanded deluxe edition includes 3 new stories and illustrations by Caitlin Walsh. Find it at nightharborpress.com or your favorite bookseller.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. I didn't realize how loud the music was in the second half.
Actually,
Yeah, I may have to fix that.
I uploaded the new vocal track for that.
Oh,
Actually,
cool.
Okay.
yeah,
Then
I
I will
forgot. I
download
forgot to tell you.
I've been pestering people, dear listener, to get commercials because right now we are small enough that we just give them away for free. The spots to deserving creators whose content we want to support. Most people just think we're scamming them when we offer them free ad spots because I understand authors get scammed a lot, or at least people try to. For only $9.99, we'll make you mega rich. But for some reason, no one ever asked, well, if you could do that, why don't you do that for yourself?
That's right.
But anyway, and so we realized, well, we've got our own stuff. And for some reason, we just never made our own commercials. So we've been working on that. And that includes all of our regulars now that come on. We call them our shenanigans crew. So we're trying to start incorporating those as well. And that includes the ones Jana made for Melissa's story. So if you want to help Jana out, you should go buy that so we can empty her closet. Buy it in paperback, though, because her basement needs some space. She wants to be able to store some more Dr. Pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the illustrations are freaking fantastic. I mean, this is kind of a side thing, but it also does tie back to our misunderstood races, fantasies, and creatures, because there's some really, really great retold fairy tales there. And Caitlin Walsh was the illustrator, and she just does such an amazing job of those different creatures. And I mean, my favorite creature from there is probably the gingerbread man. and we've got the whole... When it gets made with way, way, way too much, it's peach brandy, isn't it, Melissa? As I recall. And he is spicy and problematic, and the picture of the running gingerbread man is fantastic.
She illustrated, and the main character is a kitchen witch, and so she's inventing this gingerbread man that's supposed to be a helper around your kitchen. And so I said to Caitlin, okay, I want it to look like it's imperfect. Like she's trying something new. And so she made it this lopsided thing, and it's just the cutest illustration. She was great to work with, and I'm really glad I did it. It was totally worth doing the project. So yeah, buy the book and you will see for yourself.
All right. We haven't interviewed you on this one. We'll have to fix that.
Well, it's not really, I mean, it's just the one, so it's kind of, but we can think of something. We'll talk. We'll think of something.
Okay. Well, with that out of the way, so let's first define our terms, which should be relatively easy. So we just have to determine what is a race and what is the difference between that and a creature. So from my perspective, race would be something like humans are. They're sentient creatures, or sentient beings, sentient and sapient beings, whereas a creature is more, I think, more like an animal. That's kind of where I draw the line. Does that work for everyone, or do you got other definitions?
I would think that a race implies something bigger than just one. So you could have a one-off creature, but if it's a race, then it's got, culture and traditions, and it's got lives, and there's ongoing. It's doing its thing. So I would say you could have a race of non-human creatures like centaurs or griffins, or I don't know. So that's my definition. Is if it's a creature, then you're just looking at it as a one-off thing, and if it's a race, then you've got to deal with everybody, all the different creatures that are part of that.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the race really does imply that how does it all work together, communication, all that kind of thing. And very often when we encounter creatures, it's one of its kind, or even if you have you could have several dragons, and whether it's a race of dragons within a world or just an individual singular dragon, that may also make a line of difference between, is it St. George and the dragon, which I think would be more of a creature, versus an entire race of dragons with their own background and their own, this is how we work.
Yeah. And maybe intelligence has something to do with it too.
Yeah. And I think what you said, Melissa, about it having a race having traditions and things that they do, I think that's a big part of it for me.
So I just looked it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So a fantasy race is defined as a distinct, often non-human, sapient species or group in fiction characterized by unique biology, culture, and abilities such as elves, dwarves, orcs, or goblins. And then I asked the same query, what's a fantasy creature? A creature is a supernatural, mythical, or invented being that do not exist in the real world, originate from folklore, myth, or modern fantasy. So basically, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking I was adding a distinction between the two, because when I think creature, I think monster versus but I guess I was wrong, or at least according to the dictionary I was. In my world, I can do whatever I want, though.
That's right.
That is
it
true.
Can be your thing.
But is everyone cool with Britannica's dictionary definition?
Yeah.
Okay.
That work.
All right. We can go with that.
So are there any tropes that we can start with or races that you think are often misunderstood? I've got examples on hand for me, but I want to let the ladies go first.
Well, do you want to start with orcs? Because we were talking about orcs off camera.
So in modern tropes, orcs are obviously, they're generally described as like green skinned or greenish. I'm colorblind, so they could be off colors of green. I wouldn't know the difference. They're very brutish, warlike, many because of Warhammer. They're like cannon fodder-esque, and they're considered dumb or evil. And they're basically like an evil race in a lot of fantasy lore for some reason. But when Tolkien created them, which was where you first see the orcs, they weren't an evil race. They were individual elves that were corrupted and became individually evil. So,
well, that's sort of true. Then that was how they started, but then they bred from that, so that the orcs later are descendants of orcs. He didn't just go out and grab elves and corrupt them individually, because he couldn't have come up with, meaning Sauron, couldn't have come up with that large a population without breeding them. So that, that's partly true. I mean, that's important from Tolkien's perspective, that the elves were corrupted to be orcs, because that meant something to him about what he was doing. But
but
that changed over time, and that's why they're usually evil, is because they're a corruption of something else.
Yeah.
And where we get a lot of fantasy races that are generally seen as evil and generally used as evil as villains and antagonists and that kind of thing, is often because there is a corruption at the heart of them. They are corruption of something else. They represent corruption. And then we get lazy and we use the shorthand of, well, everybody knows that orcs are corrupted elves. So if we use that word, it's shorthand to the reader to already say this is going to be an evil race. But so then you can play with it to say whether or not you're going to follow that shorthand or you're going to adjust it for your own world.
But even if you don't... Go ahead, Terry.
I've also found it interesting. I've been rewatching The Rings of Power on Prime, and I know I'm not here to debate whether you think it's good or not, That is your opinion. But
No
it's
idea.
interesting that they do show the concept of orcs having families and kind of having that concern over, hey, we're good here. Do we really want to go to war? Not Tolkien accurate, I get it, but it's interesting to see it shown even as a concept.
Well, I feel like the thing that JR and I were talking about was that it's overdone now to have orcs be the misunderstood good guys, because I think that's interesting and complex, but it's like everybody's doing it. Everybody is looking at as orcs as being, oh, well, they have families, they have culture, they have this. And I really am not one to talk, because in World of Warcraft, I was always playing the orcs. And so I liked their culture. I liked the depth of things that they could do as a race. So
Yeah.
it's not like I don't like that. It's just that I feel like this is something that, rather than saying orcs are evil, we've swung to the other side and said, well, they're always misunderstood.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't say that the Rings of Power say that orcs are good and misunderstood. They don't quite go that far.
No, but other things do. It's not the Rings of Power. I mean, this is everything. I have not seen the Rings of Power, so I don't actually have an opinion.
There was a whole genre of the men's romance that turned, sexy orcs as a trope for a while. Under the vein of they were just misunderstood, and they might have been warlike, but it's because they had to, and really they were squishy and warm on the inside, and they just wanted to hug things and make babies.
And monster romance is still huge, and orcs are very popular within monster romance. For whatever reason, that is a particular thing that people like to read, and there's a very strong subgenre for it. But it is that kind of basis most of the time. Now, you do get dark romance with the monster romance, and I have not read much of that because it's not my cup of tea. And so there it would draw on those more classic representations, but there's a lot of them where the orcs are just misunderstood, soft, squishy green cinnamon rolls who just need someone to love.
I will say that when you talk about what's truly evil, though, in most fantasy settings, it has to be the humans, because you figure, given what we know about like orcs and all that in those settings that are violent creatures that, consent is a wishy-washy thing, and how many half-orcs there are, that tells you the concept of how the humans went out there and created those half-orc babies. And so I'm like, in those situations, I don't think they intended it that way when they made the half-breed races, but it comes off as like, man, them humans aren't so nice.
Well, actually, it goes the other way.
The other way. It's the other way around.
The orcs coming in and making babies, and I think
I've heard it the other way.
It's probably beyond what we want to talk about.
No, absolutely. I was trying to be funny and flip it, but
it's actually the other way.
Okay, and we'll leave it at that, and we'll move on.
Well, and speaking of half orcs, you get into Dungeons and Dragons and the other fantasy role-playing games that have orcs as a playable character, and one of my objections to that is that most often when I see people doing it, they're just playing humans with green skin. They're not actually trying to make it, an orc with culture, with a history. And I think that's a missed opportunity if you're going to be playing an orc or even a half orc.
Because otherwise it's for the stat boost. It's because they look at it and they go, if I get these stats as an orc, then I get to say, grr, arg, me green, and usually talk in that kind of language, which would not necessarily be true to an actual orc culture. And then also and I get boosts to my strength, and I get boosts to this, and I don't care about some of the stats that I'm going to have to take as dump stats anyway. So it's also the why you choose to play a misunderstood creature or write about it. Is it, just again to be humans that are green, or humans that have scales on their foreheads, or I'm looking at you, Star Trek. A lot of that happened there where
because that was the cheap costuming option.
Yep. So I would say if you're going to do the orcs, you would almost do it like the Lunk guy on the Planet Fitness commercials. Pick things up, put things down. That guy, the Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque vibe, where they right. Like that's kind of the barbarian caveman vibe. But anyway, I think they're fun to play with and sort of subvert
it
or
went
subvert
really far with
expectations.
it. Yeah,
Mhm.
because like Melissa had it was a half orc, wasn't it, who wrote the
Mhm.
poetry?
Yeah.
And she
Yeah,
was a
and
scholar and did poetry and all these things, so it played
yeah.
totally against type.
Yeah, this was a D&D character, and she would play into the stereotype, so she would act all brutish and gruff, and then she'd say, "Yeah, I'm just kidding you," and she was perfectly articulate and just also really strong, and that was an interesting backstory because it was a matter of her parentage being not quite what it is a healthy thing, and so I've done that, and then now I just the War Master orcs are evil, and I did not want them to be misunderstood because I had already had a race, and we'll talk about that soon, I hope, because it's one of my favorites. But I had already had a misunderstood monster race that I didn't think I could get away with two misunderstood monster races back to back. And I like the idea that orcs can be evil, and that you don't have to make them misunderstood. And my kids got all over me for, "Oh, Mom, orcs are interesting. Orcs are so cool. You can't just make them evil." And I said, "Watch me."
I like your
So
kids.
yeah, they're
They
good.
were very evil. It was great.
All
Yeah.
right, so I'm
So
going to give this as an example, and
anyway,
then we're going to move on from orcs because this isn't the orc hour. An example of subverting expectations would be Legends and Lattes,
Mhm.
the scholarly girl that was the main character of that.
Mhm.
Was it, I guess, progression fantasy, really?
Sort of
Um,
slice of life.
Slice of
Yeah.
life, but I mean, there were stats and boosts and stuff.
Yeah. 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 It's still lit RPG. Yeah.
But that was a good example of she was, she had her time. She was the warrior, and she said, "Okay, now it's time to hang up the broadsword and I don't know, make pastries and coffee and stuff." And having enjoyed a good coffee myself, I can tell you they can change your life if they're made right. So
Mhm.
I see nothing wrong
Yeah.
with it.
That's a good
But
example.
I got to pick the first misunderstood race. Melissa, you had an example you wanted to cover, so you get to go next.
Mhm. Okay, so mine is kobolds. They are a draconic lizard-like creature. They're small, and I have always been interested in them because I think they're like the wingless version of fire lizards from Anne McCaffrey. They have things in common with their draconic giant relatives, and usually they breathe fire and have the same physical resistances and things when you're talking about a D&D monster. But I used kobolds in one of the War Master books, and they were a race. They had culture, they had traditions, they had skills that they could do. They were intelligent, they had language, and I thought they were a really good choice to be a misunderstood race because they're not at all humanoid in any respect except that they walk upright. And so one of the things that makes a race misunderstood is that we're talking about humans misunderstanding them, and we're talking about the assumptions that humans make based on their interactions with the creature in question. And so in that book, the humans are all, "Oh well, they're little lizards. They're kind of creepy, and they're crawling around and interfering with us." Um, and having to learn that they weren't that they weren't evil, and that they just wanted to protect themselves and their family, made for an interesting story. So kobolds are one of the ones that I find really interesting, and I have at home like 12 or 13 kobold miniatures that I'm waiting to paint so that I can make them look like the critters from my book. So that's my monster.
Anybody want to add to that with kobold as the example?
Hmm.
I guess we could broadly go
It's
more broad and say dragons in general.
yeah.
I don't know that there's any misunderstanding of them. They're generally, big, breathe fire or something,
Mhm.
breath weapon, and
Yeah.
horde things. I don't think anyone really tries to subvert them other than sometimes people have them shapeshift and, you know, sexy monster romance, because I've seen my sister reading one of those. But I don't know that there's really any, like, they're either universally loved or hated. I don't know that there's any misunderstanding or middle ground with dragons. Anyone thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking as you said that Patricia Reedy's books dealing with dragons, the Enchanted Forest
That's where I was
books,
going to go.
the humans make assumptions about dragons being brutish and awful and destructive, and the main character discovers that they're really not that at all. They are civilized. They are very not really laid back, but they have their own interests. They really don't care about humans in the sense of wanting to eat them. And so I think that's one of the things that you can do to subvert the dragons, is to set them up as one thing and then say, well, we're really something else. Rather than, as you were saying, I mean, it's not like dragons are, you know, something that we always think of as needing to subvert.
Yeah, I mean, for me, dragons are always Pete, and they're green, and they're funny, and they're cartoonish.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a subversion, because the Pete's Dragon thing really was a subversion of what, you know, they expected dragons to be, what we might expect dragons to be. When he shows up for the first time on screen, you go, oh, well, okay. And then they sing the whole song about the head of the camel and the neck of a crocodile, and you go, yep, that's in the ears of a cow. They totally did everything that was in the song, and itty bitty teeny tiny wings, that's all a big subversion of what we expect, because we do expect dragons generally to be powerful, whether they're powerful and good and powerful and evil, or powerful and they don't care. We still expect that over the teeny tiny little teeny tiny wings in the fire that doesn't always work.
So would Mushu from Mulan be an example of that as well then for you, a version of the trope?
Oh, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. He's a total twist on it to, you know, on bucket size for your convenience.
I'd also throw Puff the Magic Dragon in there, since we're throwing back a little bit. I heard the song, and then I saw the cartoon a long time ago. But he's also green, but friendly looking, and it's an
he looks like the hippie that he is.
Yeah.
I think I mixed those two up in my head. I'm going to have to watch both of them. We might actually have to add that to our list.
That'd be funny.
What, Pete's Dragon? That'd be interesting.
I'm adding that.
There's a remake recently of that too, which I have not seen.
I haven't seen the remake either. All right, I'll add that to the list later. All right, so Terry, did you have any creatures that you thought were misunderstood that we should discuss?
I have been thinking about that since you asked Melissa, and no, I don't. The closest example I have, and it's actually from an anthology I narrated not that long ago, and I'm trying to remember if it was with you or with Three Ravens, but the story was that there was this, it was called Compact. I forget the author off the top of my head, but these humans go out and they have to kill a magical creature and get powers from it. And one of the creatures in there was a unicorn, which a lot of people think, oh yeah, they're so cool and good, and oh no, in this world they are not. It was a very interesting take on it, and I did enjoy that, but I can't think of any other subversions of expectations where unicorns are concerned. I mean, one of my favorite movies is The Last Unicorn from back in the 80s, but that's kind of your typical look at that creature.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's another way to look at this topic, is what can you do with a creature that everybody knows what it's like, and you twist that so that the characters are like, well, okay, and I did that with unicorns in the Company of Strangers series, where the shape-shifting race that turns into horses and unicorns is huge. They're like Clydesdales. They're not dainty little beautiful unicorns. They're really big.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, they are. You see that thundering down upon you on the battlefield, and you are
done.
Out of luck. You are done. And I was also thinking in terms of bad unicorns. Terry Pratchett in Lords and Ladies has the unicorn that has been driven insane, and it is basically a horse, the great big horn on its head, that's mad, and it's not pretty. It's not, it's the fairy queen's pet, and so he's like looking at that as well. If you had a unicorn, would it really be this dainty thing, or would it be like a horse? And so I thought that was interesting. Then that's what reminded me when Terry brought that up.
Mhm.
All right. Did
And
you
I
have
like giants. I like seeing the different things that can be done with that, because you think about Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Killer. Folklore Jack had a lot of dealings with giants, and
Mhm.
almost always they ended up being dumber than he was. And some people say, well, it's because Jack was really clever, and sometimes it's because the giants are really, really dumb. But you can see that. But then I've also seen them done in different works where they are wise and they are old and they're part of the hills, and they carry memory, and there's this totally different thing to them versus being, big and dumb with a big old club and they try to smack you and all that kind of thing. And they did that in Into the Woods, where
Mhm.
there was that whole, the giant had a family and the family wanted revenge, and the human beings kind of deserved a lot of what happened to them because they started it. And the
Mhm.
giants did not mess with them. The giants did not do it first. And it makes me kind of sad when the giant's wife ends up dying. Spoilers,
Mhm.
for a very
I
old
was
musical. Um,
to say, actually, I think Jack started it.
but that's
Well,
the thing.
yeah.
Jack started it, and it was a selfish started it too, where it
Mhm.
was, this is what I've done, and now I've gone up there. And his mother at one point says, "You've stolen too much," because
Mhm.
he keeps going up and he keeps stealing their stuff and running away with it. And it's like, at what point is it he's the problem? And yet
Mhm.
it's the
It's the
giants that
reactions there.
everybody goes, well, these giants are awful and they're roaming around the land stomping on people. And most of that's because she's also kind of blind and can't see very well. Um, but so I think giants are interesting because they can have, I've seen that dual nature where the expectation is often big and dumb and going to make people go
Mhm.
splat, but also wise and with families and all of that other kind of information. So
Mhm.
I think they're interesting.
Yeah.
We'll go with another one. Moving on, that I think often you see misunderstood is obviously vampires. You either have the Twilight style where they're sparkly and they're romantic, sort of tortured anti-heroes. Everyone likes to make jokes about the sparkly bit, but I mean, clearly people liked it. She sold a butt ton of copies, so I'm not yucking anybody's yum. It's just the thing, and it's become sort of a joke, somewhat of a joke, right? But also before that, of course, you had the bats in the sort of aristocratic, suave Lothario types. But if you look at their actual origins, like they were like undead monstrosities.
Mhm.
We've turned them into something else now, in a way I think takes away from the lore. I don't necessarily love the idea of how we've tried to reimagine them. I think we misunderstand their role in a story in folklore. In such a way that I think is a detriment to the lore. Because in Slavic folklore roots where they come from, they're essentially reanimated corpses
Mhm.
Yeah.
on the original sense, rising from the fresh graves. But they have, of course, the classic weaknesses, and so it kind of gives you the good versus evil tropes that you see in the beginning. It gives you a lot of the overcoming adversity. You have the value of mortality, because there's something to be said that life has no meaning if it never ends.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. I think when you take that away and you just you get what we see now. I don't know. I don't really like that. I don't know if that's necessarily a misunderstanding of them per se, but I don't like the way they're used now.
Mhm.
It's definitely a difference because I've not actually seen the full movie, but you have the kind of like Nosferatu type of vampire, the creeping up the
Mhm.
stairs. And I think that's a little closer to the original folklore.
Yes.
Whereas these days you got like Astarion from BG3 and all these other vampires in media. It's almost like it's time to let's switch back. Let's start adding in these other guys that aren't so eloquent.
But I guess, for my own bias, I think there's value of having stories where good versus evil and good triumphs. I think, there's a time and a place for the anti-hero, and we all make jokes about, was the Emperor really wrong, or, the Jedis are the real terrorists. But I think to a point, like, it's a joke, and it does a disservice to the idea that, you rise up against injustice. And I think when we subvert too much, we almost we lose that, and I think to our detriment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like vampires as villains. I thought for a long time I didn't like vampire stories, and it turned out I just didn't want them to be heroes. I loved Salem's Lot. Oh my gosh, it was such a surprise, and I don't know. There's a part of me that looks at, say, Interview with the Vampire, where it ends with the interviewer saying, make me a vampire, and the vampire going, "You have completely missed the point of my story." And the idea that vampires can be these good guys that are, they're doing all this stuff, they're actually noble, they're actually good, kind of strikes me as the sheep wanting the wolf to, sit down with them and have tea, making something really scary into something that isn't so scary, that's more palatable, I guess. And
Well, it's
I
a
don't.
bad boy redemption story.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But for her love, I mean, that's what Twilight does, where it's he could be scary and he could hurt people, but he would never hurt her. That
Mhm.
can be tamed, and that also ties into the Beauty and the Beast kind of mythos, where it is he
Mhm.
is this big beastly thing, but if the right woman is there, and it's usually a male vampire and a female woman. You see
Uh-huh.
it twisted sometimes, but not very often. But it is that for the love of a good woman, he will become better. He will get a soul in the case of something like Spike and Buffy,
Mm.
and things like that. And there's some interesting things to look at there, but I do think that it's kind of the pendulum has swung. Someone who
Mhm.
does that really in an interesting way is Alana Andrews in the Kate Daniels series, because in that case, the vampires are created by a pathogen that is introduced to a body, and it becomes this shriveled up creature of instinct and raw need, and it's there to destroy and to suck blood and things like that. But then it can be controlled by a necromancer. So their whole thing is that the necromancers can ride, then they can see through the vampire's eyes and make it do things and do all that kind of thing. But if they ever lose control, the vampires will go nut and they'll just go on a slaughtering spree. So they have
Mhm.
whole military things that are set up around if a vampire gets loose and the necromancer isn't piloting it anymore, what are you going to do before it destroys all sorts of things? So they're very, very scary, and the people who do the piloting tend to sit back. They have this big casino palace kind of thing, and they sit there and drink coffee while they send their little vampires off so that they can do things. And the juxtaposition of these really, really monstrous things, and over time they get all, because they don't need their internal organs and that kind of thing, they get all shriveled up and they go
Mm.
talons and fangs and everything else. So they're real gross too. And
Mm.
then, their people come out and they're wearing business suits and they're drinking coffee and they're doing all these very civilized things, even though they ride monsters. And I thought that was a fascinating direction to take vampires.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things is that I understood is this is more of a misunderstood trope that applies to more than just vampires. But if you're going to be immortal, why would you ever stick yourself back in high school?
Oh yeah.
Oh, heavens.
I never understood that. Like, and you see that with lots of the YA stuff. Like, you're 1,000 years old. Leave high school. Like,
Uh-huh.
you don't need to suffer in perpetuity, right? Like, unless this is some sort of weird like penance arc where you have to torture yourself.
Mhm.
And you see that a lot with some of this YA slice of the immortality question. And I get you need a way for them to interact with the main character, and it's
How are you going to get the teens to cross over with them otherwise?
right. Move it to college, because at least that makes sense. You need to update your credentials.
Yes.
But,
And Patricia Briggs did that, where she had some of her werewolves who are not immortal, but they're very, very, very long lived, who would say, I went back and got several doctorate degrees in various things that I was interested in. I'm like, that's what I would be more interested in. Instead of taking pre-calculus over and over again in high school, it would be, no, go over here and get a degree in medicine, and go get a degree in something else. And if you're going to be academic, go study lots of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know another example of one that's misunderstood in a way that I've only recently discovered because of the certain series Jan and I are writing. But mermaids in Disney are like these cute little creatures that are just fish that swim around and they do their thing and they sing and they dance. But if you look at the legends that they come from with the Celtic lore, there's some scary mamba jambas. Like they are like, your face off kind of evil.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, oh my gosh, JR, I have written so many different monsters. I have a friend who is mildly horrified that I like writing monsters so much, and I thought she was kidding. But every time you bring something up, I'm like, yeah, I did this and I don't want to, make that all about me. But monsters as, mermaids as carnivorous creatures is really great. I like that idea.
I've actually been playing with the idea of merfolk myself. And kind of taking a middle route, like they're a race unto themselves. They have culture and whatnot, but then actually trying to add in, well, they live underwater, so how do they actually communicate? Like they can do squeaks and clicks, kind of like whales or dolphins can. But how do they communicate with everybody else? So they have signs and things like that. I haven't really gotten into what they eat or how they fight. I've implied that they do and can. But it's like, how can I play with this?
There's lots of fish down there, and also depending on how deep they live, they would not look like the Little Mermaid. They would not be pale with red hair. They would look like the scary underwater fish.
Yep.
And
I've established that they're blue skin,
kind of
they have webbed hands, and
Well, actually, if they go deep enough, they wouldn't even have blue skin. They'd be translucent.
That's true. At the moment, I had them in a shallow sea, so.
Yeah. I mean, that would be less cool.
Location.
So we talked about vampires. So of course we have to mention the werewolves, right? Like it's kind of required. So in a lot of the modern versions of lycanthropy or the werewolves, they're basically tragically cursed humans who transform under the full moon, struggle with their inner monster, that kind of thing. But in medieval folklore, where the stories originated, they were actually willing sorcerers or evil ne'er-do-wells who used the pelts of the magical creatures to prevent violence on their enemies. So there wasn't so much of a curse as it was a disguise people used. They magically transformed themselves so they could do their evil and get away with it.
That's another one where there's multiple different folklores.
Okay, go on.
Because you get the ones where they use the pelts and they're causing problems. You get cursed beings, but you also get those who take it on themselves on purpose in a protective way. Because when you go to a whole bunch of people who are living at the edge of wherever, one of the scariest things you're going to get is other predators. And so some of the folklore was that these would be mystical people who would take this on purpose in order to be able to protect the villages that they came from. And tragically, sometimes that line between man and monster means they would become the very thing that they were there to protect from. And other times it was that continuation of the werewolf is there as a protection to the village. And then there would be certain sacrifices that were given, certain things that were done. So there's lots of, it's one of the interesting things when you start connecting the ones that come from different folklores, because you get lots of different starts depending on which direction those stories came from. If they were things that were helpful, if they were things that were evil, if it's a curse. But it is that idea of what happens when it's man versus monster, and that's a lot of what shifters play with. Shifters just in general is what's that line between the person and the animal, and is that a controllable line? Is it something they can do? Shifting is something they can do because they want to, or is it something that is forced upon them when the moon is full or when certain conditions are met?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize everything. Terry, did you any come to mind?
No more than what I already said.
Okay.
I'm more enjoying reacting to some of these other conversations, like, oh, that reminds me of blood and rock.
No, that's fine. So one of the ones that you see nowadays is the centaurs, because I've been studying like folklore for various projects that I'm working on. In the modern sense, they're basically like drunken barbarians, right? Like noble archers, half horse warriors. But in the Greek origins, they were kind of savage, lawless hybrids. And this is from Encyclopedia Britannica. Again, I've been using that as my source because people have been complaining about the wiki, which was just easy to access to everybody. But according to the Encyclopedia Britannica,
Good for you.
they were designed to symbolize the conflict between civilizations and chaos. So some were wise teachers like Chiron, but the race was portrayed as mostly untamed. And they're coming back into the folklore again because people like Percy Jackson's series by Rick Riordan and others.
Harry Potter.
Did Harry Potter use centaurs? I haven't read.
Oh, significantly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the centaurs are
As
significant.
the wise creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, stargazers and all that kind of thing, but still fierce fighters. And the Greeks really got into some weird stuff, particularly with the animal-human hybrids, because
Zeus couldn't zip his pants.
Because Zeus,
there's a lot of that going on. The satyrs, which are an interesting race to look at and to see what more there is to dig into there. And it's not
And it's got a lot of funny memes about how they wear their pants.
You have to think about when you're jointed oddly.
I'm thinking about that now. Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, a lot of it I've noticed just based on what we're saying comes down to the Disneyfication, and it's not all Disney doing it, but we're basically taking what were at one point in time cautionary tales or moral lessons, and we're trying to make it more soft and palatable to a modern audience that doesn't understand how harsh life can be sometimes. And I'm seeing that as a trend along a lot of it if you look at the root of the changes.
Well, sometimes it's that. Sometimes I think they're just looking for a new story to tell.
Fair.
Because there are a lot of stories that we retell a lot because people like them. But every time you look at a retelling, and we talked about this when we did the Reimagined Fairy Tales episode, that you're always looking for what is the heart of that story, and then what's your own twist that you're going to bring to it. And when certain things have been told over and over and over again, you start running out of, what's going to be the twist? And so we start getting into let's tell the story of Elphaba, the previously Wicked Witch of the West, because that's not something that we've delved into, and we could make it really, really interesting. But we look to, again, humanize those things so we make them sympathetic. And as we make them sympathetic, then that moves them away from some of those roots that are cautionary tales, evil tales, things like that. Because to just tell and say, yes, she really was as wicked and horrible as everybody thinks, there's an audience for it, but it's not going to be nearly as broad of an audience, and creators want to make money. So we need to be able to appeal to a broader audience if we want that to be something that's widely accepted. So you do Maleficent, you do Cruella de Vil, you do all these kinds of things. And in looking for that other way to do it, very often it's by saying, let's look at the empathetic side of why they are the way they are.
Yeah, but that also, to JR's point, it really is a matter of motive that you're getting to, because, in doing that, you are softening them. So where's the line there? Are you doing it because you want it to be softened, or are you doing it because it's interesting? And that's really something that only the author knows, and doesn't really matter as far as the viewer, the reader gets into it, because like Jana says, they're interested in something new. They want to see a different take on a story. And, Gregory Maguire with Elphaba really hit something. He hit on something because there's space in the Wizard of Oz to say, why is the witch who she is? And for Baum, it was like, she's just, she's the evil force that is counter to the wizard and is in opposition to Dorothy. And so he left a lot of space there for someone else to go in and tell a new story. And I think that's one of the reasons we get these fantasy creatures that get reimagined, is that they are primal, they are fundamental to the stories that we've been telling all these centuries. And that means that there's room for more interpretation. There's room for something new.
Mm-hmm. It's also a good way to say, what if?
Yeah.
And it kind of preserve the basics of the original story, but then go, what if this was true, and how would that change things? As opposed to just play with point of view, like I interpret Elphaba and her story as like, oh, well, everyone else saw her as the original way that, the Wizard of Oz original did. But then this comes in and shows her side of it. Who writes the history? Victor does. And she, well, spoilers, but there's a couple different ways to approach it. And it's interesting.
Well, another interesting one that's, I don't know if they're necessarily misunderstood or it's just a duality of nature, but like the forest hags, on the one hand, they are the woman that didn't fit in, that maybe knew a little bit too much about plants. So clearly, there goes magic, witch, whatever, demonic pack. And maybe some of them are truly evil. They lure kids out into the woods, think Hansel and Gretel, so they can eat them and cook them in their oven. Or you've got the lady that's just, wants to be left alone because nobody understands her, or the depressed widow, but she knows a lot about herbs, so she helps bring babies into the world, or even the magic sort of sorcerer shaman woman who, makes love potions for people. But again, in a puritanical society, didn't fit in. And that's another interesting one to see gets kind of mixed up on all the tellings, and no one can quite decide what to do with that archetype.
I think part of that is when you come down to it, in some of the origins of that, you have the wise woman who does know a lot of things and how to, do these different cures, quote unquote, that are logical and make sense, but then everyone else around is like, oh gosh, a woman who knows things.
But that's kind of ironic because women are the keepers of culture in traditional sort of societies before modernity, because who raises the children, who's keeping the home, and back before you had Roombas and dishwashers, and maybe Zumba too, I don't know, I'm not going to judge your dance styles. But you know what I mean? But it used to be a lot of work to do maintain a home, and to do the cooking and keep the fire going. And they were passing on what it meant to be Irish, or to be Slavic, or to be, native to whatever, insert region of the world. And so the culture was passed through them. So I still find it ironic that, given that the archetype of the forest hag exists, because you would think that, other women might have been more sympathetic. But again, there's the one that didn't fit in. I don't know. It's a weird thing for me that I can't quite figure out how I place in my head.
Yeah, that's how women enforce community, is through shaming and outcasting. So yeah.
Or the flip side of that, I'm not going to be associated at all, so I'm safe.
Yeah.
But it's just an interesting one for me because there's so many ways to take on it, and there's not really any unified answer. So I think the misunderstanding there isn't the portrayal; it's nobody can quite figure out what they are to begin with, which I think can be somewhat fun to play with.
Unless you're playing D&D, in which case, all bets are off.
So an example, when I did, I didn't. So a lot of these, if you notice me reading from Encyclopedia Britannica, it's because I prepped for some of these. Forest hags, I did not, but I did a quick Google as we were talking. Baba Yaga is listed as an example of a forest hag.
Yep.
And clearly, she's not necessarily nice, but she's not necessarily evil either.
That's right.
And then you've got the Hansel and Gretel woman in the woods. Clearly, she's not nice. But on the other side, you've got, the person that takes in lost travelers in the woods and feeds them and gives them somewhere warm to stay until the rain stops, right? Like there's examples, but it's always polar. And I think it kind of reflects the dual nature of nature itself. It's fickle, right? Sometimes it's really, really kind, and the other times T-Rex is going to eat your head.
True. Yeah.
Well, and oftentimes, again, looking at the various fairy tales and folklore, those forest hags are also... they're a point that the hero has to come across, and depending on how the hero behaves to them, determines a lot about his fate. If you want to, the 12 Dancing Princesses as an example, and when you are nice to the woman in the woods, she gives you all the information for how it is that you're going to be able to get past what's going on with the princesses and their curse. But those who are not, she gives them no information, and they fall prey to what's going on. And you see that a lot, where you have these ugly women, and the heroes will encounter them, and how you treat them changes your fate significantly. And so it's not necessarily because, again, they're good or evil, but because they are holders of that past, holders of that information, and you have to earn it.
So
that makes them
Be
interesting.
polite, dang it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the same thing with Beauty and the Beast, right? If he had just been nice to that lady at the door.
Nothing would have
right.
happened. It all would have
Mhm.
been fine.
Mhm.
So, but okay, so one more from me, and then I'll let everyone have any closing thoughts because we are approaching an hour. But another one that I think is sometimes misunderstood is you see a lot of like undead ghosts are just horror fodder, like they're just cannon fodder for horror stories. But in a lot of times, the cultures they're instead of being reduced to sort of zombie hordes or spooky apparitions, a lot of cultures saw them as restless spirits of their ancestors. So they're almost mysteries to solve to put your forefathers at peace with that you can join them later. And so I find that kind of interesting how that's evolved and changed. Again, I'm not necessarily sure that's a misunderstanding so much as an evolution, but it kind of fit in there with the changing takes on certain things that Janet was talking about earlier. Because
I think
ancestors keep the lore.
I think ghosts are scary enough that humans do misunderstand initially. I mean, you get a lot of that in stories. Is their first reaction is fear, and so I think they do the misunderstanding because then the ghost who knows what the ghost's real motive is, and they aren't necessarily out there to hurt you. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a misunderstanding that. And usually it's corrected pretty early on because the author wants the ghost to be part of the story and be information and helpful, or in Meg Cabot's case in the Mediator series, the love interest. So,
It's true.
but yeah, I think they are misunderstood.
All right.
Well, and they're often the solution to any number of we can't explain this. Things happen, it must be a ghost, it must be haunted, or we have the history of something bad happened here, and now there are effects that we're observing. Well, that must be a ghost. It must be this, that, and the other. And they're interesting, and they get your imagination going. And I've done the ghost tour in New Orleans a couple of times, and I mean the ghost tour. It's New Orleans.
Hey,
There are a million ghost
yeah.
tours, so I have done 2. And it was amazing that walk around and the questions that they ask and the things that you start feeling, and you spend your time going, is this me, or is there actually something here? And ghosts are that interesting question because of all of our monsters, they're very often the ones that are incorporeal, that you may not see the actual creature, you see the effects the creature causes. And so that can make for a lot of misunderstanding as to what the goals and motivations are, or is that even really the thing that's causing the effect to happen in the story altogether?
Okay. Does anybody else have any last ones for the road?
I was just thinking in the most general term of monsters that are completely alien to humans, because a lot of these creatures that we've talked about have some kind of humanoid features, and I'm thinking, giant bugs. Just that was the one that came to mind, but anything that is not obviously going to be intelligent. And I think that's where, creatures are misunderstood, because if you can't communicate, then how do you get across the fact that you're not vicious? You're not going to kill the adventurers or the humans or the heroes. And so I think that that's a really good opportunity for characters to learn how to interact with other races that they can't speak to. And so I kind of like that idea when I see it in stories, of the non-human alien in the most general sense, creature.
I like it. Yeah, that's we're talking about misunderstood, and I guess the podcast is better, different angles you can take on creatures so that you have that this is what is generally thought of them, but there's so many different directions they can go, and there's so many interesting stories to tell there, whether you're telling it through video games or you're telling it through books or whatever else, is to take those and say, well, what's the expectation, and what are all the different directions that it can go, and then how does that again relate back to us as the humans that are going through the story, along with our main characters.
Yeah.
And I think even your definition of misunderstood would change over time, because as generations go on, the newer ones have the understanding that is current but different
Mm-hmm.
to the ones that
Mm-hmm.
came before.
Mm-hmm.
So a misunderstanding can eventually, I think, do a 180
Mm-hmm.
and start heading
Yeah,
back
I
the
agree.
direction that it originally came from.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you that you can join the conversation on any of the social media platforms where we share these episodes and tell us what you think is the most misunderstood creature, fantasy, or otherwise. We'd love to hear from you. And this is the part where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. It really does make a difference. And with that, this is going to be, as we wind it down, Melissa, where might we find you on the wild interwebs, and what are you writing now? Keep in mind, this will be airing in May.
Okay. I can be found at my website, melissamcshannewrites.com, where there's a link to my newsletter, which is published monthly and has information about sales and new releases and stories about my life in India. And you can also find my stuff at nightharborpress.com, which is my storefront. You can buy signed books, ebooks, and audiobooks. And buy those print books and get them out of Jana's basement.
Woo!
There you go. And what are you working on now?
Oh, right. What am I working on now? Let's see. Depending on how fast I'm moving, I am probably still working on the 5th book in my new series, The Swap. But it might be the new Lit RPG sequel series to War Master.
What? Love it.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Terry? Where might we find you, and what are you working on, both narrating and writing?
I can generally be found skulking in the dark forests of Facebook, and sometimes even on the Amazon forest. Currently, I am narrating another work by J.F. Posthumous, which is highly entertaining to me. And for writing, I'm actually working on a play that will be performed in the town I currently live in. Don't know if that'll ever be released to the wide world, but it's about vampires in a garden, and I'm enjoying the hell out of writing it.
Good.
Sweet.
Nice. What about you, Jana? Where might we stalk you on the wild interwebs?
Well, I am the loser at Internet Hide and Go Seek, so if you search up my pen names and it has to do with publishing, it's probably me. It is me almost all the time. But if you want to go more directly, you can go to Linktree, linktr.ee/Opal Kingdom Press, and that's going to have all sorts of links to all sorts of things. Those change sometimes, but there's a lot there. And JR requested that I put the link to my Etsy shop there. I have been making a crap ton of little jellyfish and octopi. Why am I doing this? I don't know. It's mostly because I found a big stash of cotton yarn, and they're really, really cute and really easy to make and all those kinds of things. And I should have been working on one tonight, but I'm giving my wrists a break. Every now and again, even really dedicated crocheters have to do that. But you can find me over there. You can find all sorts of information. I am not hard to locate. And what I will be working on as we get towards air of this, hopefully we'll be rounding the end of the reboot, the first book in the reboot, which, yes, I know, guys, we've been working on for a long time, but life has had stuff in it. It's been big stuff and gnarly stuff, but we're still working, and that's the entire point, is we've continued to make forward progress.
That's right.
So hopefully that, and I will hopefully be closing in on getting the first Diana McDonough book out. There's a whole bunch of short stories about her in various places, and so hopefully this will be the first book of it, and hopefully that'll be also wrapping up around that time. So we'll see. We'll see. If I say it out loud, life sometimes craps on it, so don't hold me to that. All right, JR, what are you doing? Where can we find you?
So I normally don't remember to list it, even though I list Jana's every time she's on. But I have a website, jrhandley.com, and I'm just about everywhere, JR Handley or JR_Handley, except on Facebook, where it's Sergeant SJT.jr.Handley, and that's just because there was another at the time, JR Handley. His account is no longer there, so I suppose I could claim JR, but at this point I've had it for so long, who cares? I'm too lazy to change it. And I worked really, really hard to get those promotions. I mean, I was a corporal 3 times, for crying out loud. So that's where you can find me. And as far as what I am writing, we are still working on the reboot. But the other thing I've been doing is, as many of you follow, we partner up with Three Ravens. They pimp our stuff, we pimp theirs. It's kind of mutual symbiosis. And with the founder of Three Ravens has some health issues. He's mentioned this publicly, so I'm not naming and shaming anything. He's had to downsize drastically what he's doing. So a lot of the J.R. Handley Presents, in fact, all of the J.R. Handley Presents anthologies, and some that were yet unpublished that were going to be under other names for anthologies, were sent over to us to publish under Bayonet Books. So we have been scrounging to get hundreds of contracts out, signed, stories, final edits, and dropping sometimes 2 or 3 books at a time up on the interwebs. So it has been busy, and it slowed my writing down a little bit, but I just feel like the authors that were gracious enough to send me stories deserve to have them still out there. So I did not want them to go unpublished, especially since for some authors, this is the only published work they have at the moment. And that does make a difference. So we are working on that. By the time this airs in May, hopefully it will be dry, because you know what they say about May and weather, especially in the South. If it's not the humid, it's the rain. But hopefully all those will be caught up, and I'll be back to writing full time. I've mentioned I got the new glasses with the prisms in them. It's helping me see. It's great. I love it. I'm getting caught up. I'm a lot more productive. So life cooperates, knock on wood, and we are going to be rocking and rolling. And with that, you can find us on the podcast at linktr.ee /Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, linktree / Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things: the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Substack. We've got the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades podcast @gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. You can save the shenanigans from Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/AuthorJR Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/AuthorJR Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they get high on their own supply. Only the best coffee, tea, and hot chocolate for them. And if you want some of that coffee, tea, or hot chocolate, the link is in the show notes. The discount code is Podcast Grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. That is mostly how we fund the podcast, and it covers just a little bit of what we pay every year to keep this podcast up and running. It is a labor of love, people. And with that, even the puppy agrees. I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And now I hit the end button before the dog goes nuts. Wait for